All right, you heard Bryan say it there with a lot of explicitives that it's Canelo week. He's going to be defending his undisputed super middleweight titles, and it's against John Ryder. If you're from the UK, you're probably going hard for this man, but it's going to be Cinco de Mayo weekend, and it's going to be in Canelo's backyard, which is absolutely massive. You know, people are going to show out for him. I cannot wait to see how this looks like on TV. But let's get right into it, Bryan. Canelo versus John Ryder. How do you see this one going?
So Canelo hasn't fought in Mexico since 2011, November. Wanted to look that up to make sure I was right. Kermit Cintron, my Puerto Rican brother, got knocked out in 5 rounds. And this was when Canelo Alvarez was a super welterweight, which feels like a long time ago. Canelo Alvarez is still pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. I would still say the most popular fighter in the world at this point. There was a face of boxing conversation that happened after Gervonta Davis knocked out Ryan Garcia. And I don't think he's dethroned Canelo Alvarez yet. I think he could be on his way if he fights more Ryan Garcia type fights, but I don't get the sense that the next one is going to be that unless, you know, he does wait for the Devin Haney, Shakur Stevensons of the world and things of that nature. But anyway, with Canelo Alvarez, this feels like just a rebound from the Dmitry Bivol loss, even though we just saw him fight Gennady Golovkin in September. I feel like people have already forgotten about that, even though that was a pretty big fight.
It felt like a while ago.
It does. It felt like a while ago, and it almost didn't feel like it happened, right? So John Ryder, we'll spend a couple minutes on him. He's a credible challenger, like WBO interim champion. He beat Danny Jacobs, depending on how you scored it. And it was in his hometown, so maybe some home cooking there, split decision win. But I thought he fought a great fight. I did have Danny Jacobs edging it out, but I have no problem with people picking John Ryder to win that fight. I thought it was a very close fight. John Ryder got stronger, particularly as the fight went on. And inexplicably, Danny Jacobs switched southpaw during the fight, and then John Ryder was able to have some success there. I feel like that really turned the fight. 1 stoppage loss. He's 32-5 with 18 knockouts. John Ryder is 1 stoppage loss. It was to Nick Blackwell for the British Super Middleweight Championship in 2015. That was an early stoppage. It was a really early stoppage if you looked at it. And I just don't think that like John Ryder is going to win this fight, but I don't want to overlook the fact that he's earned this fight. Like, this is somebody, and I was reading up on his story. Yes, he's credible and the 2-time interim champion, but he's also somebody that, like, you know, he's worked different types of jobs in order to sort of make his career go by. So it hasn't been just all boxing, whatever the case may be. I think I read on Boxing Scene that he was like a bouncer at a nightclub. You know what I mean? He got like a doorman's license in 2017 and, you know, sort of came up that way. And now he's going to get his biggest purse ever.
Yeah.
But Canelo Alvarez is that dude, still is that dude. And we'll be looking forward to what happens with Canelo Alvarez after, which we're going to talk about as the show sort of unfolds and does multiple segments on this fight coming up.
Yeah, and we're also going to be doing a betting preview as well. But let's take a little bit with Canelo because, like you mentioned, he is coming off that victory over Gennady Golovkin back in September, and then he took time off because of wrist surgery. And coming into this one, I think people were thinking that the odds were going to be higher, and we'll get to that in our betting preview that we are going to be dropping. But before then, he lost to Bivol, and before he lost to Bivol, everybody was talking about how he was pound for pound #1 boxer in the world. I still have him on my pound for pound list. I mean, this man has over 60 professional fights, and he's only 32 years old, 31 years old, something like that. So he's still very, very young. Yeah, so he's still very young. But in boxing ages, like, he's way older, like, when you think about it in that sense. But Canelo coming into this one, they said that he injured his hand, I believe, in the Caleb Plant fight. So if you think about it, Canelo's been fighting injured that whole entire time. Imagine how he's going to look when he's healthy. He's taken some time off, and I think he's going to look refreshed and better than ever. As for John Ryder, like Bryan mentioned, I mean, when you take a look at this record, I know everyone wants their O's, but at the same time, he's been in the ring with some dudes, 32-5-1, 18 of those wins coming by way of knockout. And like I mentioned when we first had this announcement of this fight, a lot of UK fans were saying that we were sleeping on John Ryder. So we got to give him a little bit of props here, right? Let's talk a little bit about his fighting skills because he is a southpaw and his best punch is definitely his right hook. It's absolutely nasty and it has a little bit of power as well. He is on a 3-fight win streak, and Bryan mentioned he, had that split decision win over Daniel Jacobs. In that fight, I actually gave it to Daniel Jacobs. And in the beginning of that fight for the first 6 rounds, Daniel Jacobs was bodying him. And I thought John Ryder looked clueless. And if he goes into the ring and does that against Canelo, it's not going to be a good look for him. He also lost to Callum Smith back in 2019. That's when Callum Smith was undefeated. And that was a very controversial loss for him. Some people thought John Ryder got robbed. And same thing with him against Billy Joe Saunders. There were some John Ryder fans that thought that he won against Billy Joe Saunders. And of course, Billy Joe Saunders lost to Canelo Alvarez as well. So he's been in the ring with some dudes, but the fact that he's been on this 3-fight win streak, and I think he kind of really rose to fame. And I kind of talked about this earlier when this fight first got announced. But when he fought Bilal Akawi, Akawi was 20-0-1 at the time, and that was for the WBA Super World Middle. And that's when he showed off that nasty right hook that he has. He had Akawi down twice in round 3. They stopped that in the 3rd round. And that was when John Ryder really gained a little bit of cachet after that fight. And now he has a chance to get the biggest payday in his career. And the biggest thing that I want to see is he going to come into that ring to win, or is he going to come into that ring to survive? I think he really thinks he has a chance, but at the same time, we know how good Canelo is. And in this fight, I'm definitely going to be rolling with Canelo. I actually think it's going to end sooner than people think. I think it still goes to the mid rounds, but I think—
Well, don't give away your bet.
Yeah, they're going to have to tune in for that because you have to listen in on what specific rounds I'm going to roll with.
Yeah.
And how I think it's going to actually go. But I do think that for Canelo Alvarez, I think he's going to get to the body because he's one of the most elite body punchers in the game. And that's how he's going to definitely hurt John Ryder, because John Ryder leaves himself open at times. But I think at the same time, John Ryder is going to want to fight with Canelo Alvarez. Keep in mind that this is also a shorter fighter for Canelo, right? Canelo's been fighting some big dudes.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting, the matchup in this one, but I have Canelo winning. And I actually do think this is going to be a pretty entertaining fight, but I want to know what type of John Ryder are we going to get? Are we going to get that John Ryder that we saw in that first half against Daniel Jacobs? Or are we going to get a John Ryder that's going to be looking to be a little bit aggressive against Canelo at first? Because, Canelo isn't always the fastest starter. He's going to figure you out right away. So I'm curious to see what John Ryder we get, but we know that he's going to get a big-ass payday. So I'm curious to see if he's going to come in and just try to survive against Canelo, because there's a reason why Canelo Alvarez picked John Ryder to fight in his backyard after he just had surgery. After the questions came up as well, when he lost to Bivol, is Canelo the best? The man has over 60 professional fights. Let's stop knocking people just because they have a loss. And there's also talk, if we are seeing the latter end right now of Canelo's career, where we might see him be hey, is he falling off? There's questions about Canelo at this time with that.
I have him. You know what I mean?
Really? Okay, so you think—
No, it's not even just watching Canelo sort of slide or whatever. It's not that. I don't see that. I still see him as the best super middleweight in the world, one of the best light heavyweights in the world, even though I'd rather not see him at light heavyweight, going out like that. But for me, it's more of a thing how long can you be excellent? And he's been a world champion level fighter for 12, 13, 14 years, something like that, right?
And the face of boxing. And
post Floyd Mayweather, yeah. So Floyd Mayweather retires in 2015. He has the Conor McGregor thing in 2017. So we'll call it, a 6 to 8 year period where Canelo Alvarez has been that. And, and shit, that includes the Dimitri Bivol loss, which tells you how big his star power truly is. People are going to be watching this fight, even though it's one-sided, super one-sided on paper. But I think with Canelo Alvarez, I have questions about, and we talked about this after David Benavidez beat Caleb Plant. It's I wouldn't favor David Benavidez at all, but youth, size, speed, power. Like those are some of the attributes that typically take a guy like Canelo out at this stage of his career. Historically, if you look at boxing, if you look at other combat sports, like these are usually the guys that get you. I would still favor Canelo to win that hypothetical. But the reason where John Ryder comes into play is that I don't think he's necessarily the guy that will beat Canelo at this stage. And
this is a tune-up. This is a tune-up fight.
We saw it with Dimitri Bivol already, but I do think we're getting to the point where, like, I think how Canelo looks in this fight matters, right? John Ryder, to your point, has been in there with a lot of guys, some of which I'll name, Rocky Fielding being another one. Canelo destroyed him in 3 rounds. I was at that fight, covering that fight, Madison Square Garden. It sucked. That was his first super middleweight championship, and it was a 3-round TKO. It was easy work, right? John Ryder lost to him. John Ryder also lost to, as you mentioned, Callum Smith, as I mentioned, Nick Blackwell, also Billy Joe Saunders, like you said, and Jack Arnfield. You know, this is somebody that Canelo should put away. But at the end of the day, he's 5'9", him being John Ryder, southpaw, 72-inch reach, which is, you know, pretty solid for that height. And according to BoxRec, the 3rd best super middleweight in the world. You could agree, disagree with that. They have Canelo Alvarez number 1, David Benavidez, who we just mentioned, number 2, John Ryder is 3rd. 4th is Dimitri Andrade. So you could do Demetrius Andrade. So you could do with that what you will. So yeah, I think this is a big fight, big opportunity for John Ryder. But if he impresses in the time that he lasts, I think that's going to be indicative of some things for Canelo moving forward. But we'll see if he does that.
Here's the thing. I don't think people are thinking, yo, Canelo's going to come in round 1 or 2 and just like knock out John Ryder. I don't think people are expecting that, but I think they are expecting a finish from Canelo. And you take a look at the odds, and the odds tell you that too when we get into the betting. I'm too excited about the betting. I keep talking about that. But I mean, I think I would have seen Canelo as a bigger favorite if he's already a big favorite, but like we've seen sometimes a favorite be like -35.
Well, yeah.
Right?
Yanni Beck, middleweight champion, defending his title next week, is a -6,000 favorite against Stephen Butler, and that's going to be on ESPN. So,
yeah, so I just
think our boy Jason Maloney's on the co-feature though.
Yeah, which by the way, we just dropped an episode with Jason Maloney. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you do. Such a great guy. But I really, really think that Canelo's going to quiet all of the doubters during this time, because there's only, and we will get to it if Canelo wins. We can't say that he will, because we got to, you know, wait to see what John Ryder does. We can't be biased here. But if Canelo wins, we're also going to be dropping something for what's next for Canelo. So I don't want to give away too much for that in terms of what his path might be after. But huge fight for Canelo Alvarez. So here at the Mandatory, we want to know who you have winning and how, and what you expect from Canelo Alvarez. Are you excited for his return? Make sure to drop some comments below. And remember to follow us at the Mandatory TKO. And if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. We got to move on.